Joining us now, MSNBC political analyst Anthony Coley. He's the former director for the Office of Public Affairs at the Biden DOJ, and Max Boot, a senior fellow for national security studies at the Council on Foreign Relations and a columnist for the Washington Post. Thank you both for joining us as we work on this and think about and talk about this breaking news. Gavin Newsom tweeted out, "The federal government is sowing chaos so they can have an excuse to escalate." We saw President Trump sign this memo yesterday invoking, I think it's Title 10. Max, talk about that. Is the president, do you agree with Governor Newsom, sowing chaos so they have an excuse to escalate?
Well, it sure seems like Governor Newsom is compelling in his analysis. I mean, if you kind of zoom out to the 20,000-foot view, I mean, what is provoking this confrontation in L.A.? It's the fact that the Trump administration is sending out these heavily armed federal agents in body armor and face masks, in many cases with assault weapons and tactical gear, to round up construction workers, to round up busboys, to round up hardworking immigrants, some of whom may be undocumented, but who are contributing to our economy and are, in many cases, paying sales taxes, paying Social Security taxes, essentially helping to make America great, to coin a phrase. And they, suddenly the Trump White House has imposed these quotas on ICE to go out, and they're demanding more and more roundups. And so it was kind of inevitable that you would see this kind of confrontation and pushback because they're now going to these workplaces and in heavily Latino working class communities like Paramount in Southern California. And so they're not shying away from the confrontation. They seem to be causing the confrontation, and you can just see that President Trump revels in the strongman image of, there's chaos in the streets, send out the troops. That is imagery that mobilizes his base and that accumulates even more power in the White House. So there's no question that the White House is provoking this, and it's a very delicate and very inflammatory situation that could very easily spiral out of control.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, as we've mentioned many times, the border czar is in Los Angeles, and NBC's Jacob Soboroff had a chance to talk to him yesterday. Let's play a bit of their conversation and talk about it on the other side. Watch this.
What is the federal military mission in
Los
Los Angeles?
It isn't a military mission. The president's bringing National Guard here to protect the public and protect officers. Where the officers have been attacked, where the officers injured. So he's sending here as a force multiplier for law enforcement here, but not just to protect the law enforcement, to protect the general public. If Democratic leaders want to turn their back on public safety, they can. President Trump's not going to.
You said it's not a military mission, but isn't that what Title 10 is, or am I misunderstanding something?
They're here for a law enforcement mission to protect the public and protect law enforcement. That's what it is.
Anthony, you are the former DOJ official at the table.
Right.
Is the border czar correct?
Let me just say, for the record, this guy just so happens to be on the ground in Southern California at the moment, right? This is not a coincidence. This is carefully orchestrated. And what's striking to me is just these images, to Elisa's point, these images are bad. The rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration is bad, but neither the images or the rhetoric match what's really happening on the ground across the country. On this particular issue, 2,000 troops, there have been 12 arrests. Right? That is completely disproportionate. And Donald Trump says the reason he is cracking down on this entire issue in terms of immigration is because violent criminals, undocumented, illegal aliens are infiltrating American neighborhoods. The fact of the matter is that violent crime in this country is at record lows. That started, you mentioned, in the Biden administration. That started in the Biden administration. I was in the room with U.S. attorneys across the country when they were announcing their tailored programs, crime prevention programs, to bring down, to arrest the curb of violent crime. And we're seeing the benefits of that just up the street in Baltimore, right? They have very few homicides at this moment. It's like record low homicides. So my point here is that Donald Trump creates all of these this rhetoric. He's using this rhetoric about an invasion of illegal immigrants when the fact of the matter is that violent crime is at a low.
Mm-hmm.
record lows.
Hi. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson in Los Angeles. Steve, I hope that you managed to get a bit of sleep. The last I saw you last night, you were wearing a gas mask while you were reporting because so much tear gas was going on, was coming down around you. Talk about what you're seeing and what you're hearing on the ground.
Yeah, still suffering from the tear gas this morning, unfortunately. Most of the protests that we saw, at least when we were on the ground in Paramount, most of them were people peacefully protesting, just sort of standing there. A lot of insults, of course, hurled at police that were obviously trying to push back against demonstrators spilling out into the street. And that's really what the source of the conflict was. By the time we got there, a lot of these guys are local police, they are sheriff's department, they are in an assistant role, and they really wanted to make that clear in statements that they offered. Sheriff Luna with the LA County Sheriff's Department really saying that they were there just to handle the demonstrations. They were not part of any of these federal raids. LAPD sort of echoing the same sentiment. Yet, obviously, these clashes are really tense. We saw that last night at the detention center. About 9 o'clock last night, another unlawful assembly declared. You see the car on fire there. That's Paramount. As these sort of things escalate, and then the police line starts forming and start pushing back on people, and then those irritants and the non-lethal weaponry fired into the crowd, and things get really, really bad. And that's what we saw, obviously, all throughout the day yesterday. But as far as the federal raids go, the protests really have been a jumping-off point at these flashpoint locations. And I think, obviously, with the escalation that the National Guard coming in offers, I think a lot of people only worry that that is going to worsen the situation, is going to make it worse and not better. And that's what we've been hearing from, obviously, the elected officials, Gavin Newsom, Mayor Bass, but certainly from protesters, too, who believe that, they're going to fight back against anything that authorities wheel out, and this will only be another escalation in that, guys.
Steve, on that point about the protesters, I'm wondering, how many protesters are we talking about? Are we talking about a few dozen, hundreds, thousands? Give us a sense of how many people you saw when you were on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, look, these locations are so vast and so split up. Paramount, for example, the place you're looking at right now on screen, right? There's a checkpoint above at sort of the light, the intersection where that shot was, where there's kind of like a perspective into the sunset. Mm-hmm. A few dozen there, a few dozen near that car, a few dozen outside of the Home Depot. That's what you're seeing right there, that black fence. I'm very familiar with that scene right there. Mm-hmm. And then a few dozen at the intersection where, again, LA County was sort of stationed trying to push people back from heading to a scene like that, where that cloud of smoke that you're looking at on screen right there, that is tear gas. And if you're in that, you can certainly feel it. So sort of dozens of protesters all across a scene like that. And then when you head downtown into LA, those dozens turn into hundreds, which can be, I think, a little tough for authorities to get a handle on, especially when you're spread out in multiple locations. And there are agitators, of course, in every crowd. Most of the crowds, again, that I saw, that I spoke to, that I was interacting with, these are peaceful people that want to get their message across. They brought signs. They're out with families in some places. And others are obviously more agitant, have the mask on, and reportedly, I didn't see this, but reportedly throwing things back at authorities that are trying to do their jobs as well. So it's sort of a varied, up and down, sort of a back and forth between how many, are in the crowd and how many are not. But I would say dozens at all the locations that we've seen, guys.
Steve, you've been doing great reporting. Thank you.